Everyone's facing this major problem where the economics of the entire media rights spectrum have completely changed. It's getting increasingly more difficult to monetize because subscription growth is just not there. Media rights holders absolutely have to focus on what their ad-supported streaming strategy is. They have to look at creating more dynamic, more personalized experiences that aren't disruptive to the viewer, where the viewer can actually engage with the advertising as they're watching programming. It has to be executed in more of a native and conversational way of the viewer, because the most important thing is how do you actually sustain viewers' attention.
Welcome to The Pubway, an original podcast by SeedTag, the global leader in neurocontextual advertising. Join us as we sit down with leaders from across the media ecosystem to unpack the trends, challenges, and innovations shaping the supply side of ad tech. Let's get started.
Hello, and welcome to the Pubway podcast. My name is Tina Yanakino.
And I'm Mike Villalobos. And in today's episode is my favorite topic of all time, innovation. But not just any innovation. It's going to be talking about streaming, especially streaming in live sports.
Yes, and joining us today for this amazing topic is Scott Young, the co-founder and chief product officer at Transmit. Hey, Scott, how are you?
Great. How are you guys?
Very good.
Very, very good. So happy you're joining us today. And before we dive into all our topics, I think it'd be great to give our listeners a little background on your career trajectory, how you became a co-founder at Transmit, and how maybe that's perhaps changed from where you started to where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. I've spent about over 20 years in advertising technology or digital advertising, back when we were still on dial-up accessing the internet. On the agency side, where I actually think I learned a lot that shaped some of the things that I'm even doing today. Because starting in the early days of digital, where there wasn't much infrastructure, there wasn't much support on the teams, doing everything from ad operations to media planning, taught me a lot there, which actually pushed me into where I saw the growth in the industry, which was in video streaming, where went right into a sales job actually for CBS Sportsline, where we executed probably the first major live stream production, ad-supported live stream production with Madness on Demand, and then took that further in the tech realm to build a couple of video ad networks in the early days in like 2008, 2009, prior to a bunch of them going IPO like Yumi. And then that led me towards running video at a major data company and software provider in Epsilon. Looking back from kind of like the historical experience and trends, really started to realize that there was some major gaps, especially in live streaming, in terms of what can be executed today from the ad experience and how publishers and advertisers can actually gain value out of that. There's just such limited opportunity to monetize live streaming, especially sports. And as viewership is growing, figured we're really going to be missing out that opportunity unless we solve some technical gaps and create some new innovation, which led me to partner with my co-founder, Pittman, about 8 years ago. We founded this kind of thing. That was in late 2016, 2017. And what we are focused on is we work with a variety of media operators, streaming provider rights holders. We have a heavy presence in sports, specifically live sports. And they deploy our software to really solve the problem of how we transform the advertising experience into entertainment. And our products are really focused on that and driving greater monetization value for both publishers and advertisers in the form of creating new incremental advertising inventory outside of the traditional ad break, making that fully addressable. In the form like, you're talking like picture-in-picture video integrations, overlays, graphics, and making that all dynamic and personalized to each viewer watching concurrently. And as a result, today we operate one of the largest in-content advertising marketplace, creating new high-impact advertising opportunities that publishers can deploy within their streams and that advertisers can connect to ultimately drive greater value back to advertisers in the form of outcomes and greater yield for our media partners.
That's awesome. You mentioned something about growth earlier in your comment. Ad-supported platforms are now seeing double-digit growth year on year, and I think it's starting to see a shift, especially from people not just unplugging and going into like the Netflix, the Hulu's of the world, but also using fast channels as well. There are a lot of innovation components that could play into that. What do you think is the most crucial bit as we go into obviously the World Cup and we go into women's sports, especially getting so much more viewership in live streaming? What are the crucial components that go into planning and innovating in that arena?
Everyone's facing this major problem where the economics of the entire media rights spectrum have completely changed, whereas the rights are getting more expensive. More streamers are getting access to these rights in varying ways. So it's even getting more fragmented of how and where and when you can access these streaming rights. And it's getting increasingly more difficult to monetize because subscription growth is just not there. And if anything, it's stagnant. And now it's just being shared across more properties rather than going to your cable provider. So it causes a really big issue. Media rights holders absolutely have to focus on what their ad-supported streaming strategy is. I think, there's a lot of challenges with the just relying on the existing ad pod to cover that gap, which is absolutely not going to happen. So they have to look at creating more dynamic, more personalized experiences that aren't disruptive to the viewer, where the viewer can actually engage with the advertising as they're watching programming. So occurs in stream outside of the traditional ad break, but has to be executed in more of a native and conversational way of the viewer, because it can't be jarring or disruptive, because the most important thing is how do you actually sustain viewers' attention.
Absolutely. And I think it's funny, when you guys founded this company, I myself was at a CTV OTT company called Vemba, and back in like 2017, 2018. And I remember, for us at least, like dynamic SSAI or contextual SSAI was a bit of a pipe dream. It's something really, really cool that we wanted to eventually do in the future, but it seemed like far away. And now I feel like for you guys, you're really kind of rethinking that traditional 30-second spot and being more impactful and engaging in those live moments. Do you have like any fun examples of how you guys are approaching that?
Yeah. I think one, like we get more into how that is solving the technical challenges in like how the ecosystem is even built today, because there's obviously still challenges. But yeah, how we're solving that is, our software operates as server-side ad insertion software, like you said, and we're dynamically replacing segments of a stream. That gives us a lot of flexibility regarding what people, so the context that someone can see an ad, who they are and what they care about, and then the creative that can be deployed and the messaging that can kind of like tie in to what the viewer is watching and also what they care about in that moment. So we are creating lots of ad signals based off of reading information about what's happening in a stream, like a home run or a touchdown, or call it just winning moments. So we'll recognize, okay, winning moments. Then that actually is a new ad inventory type that can actually be decisioned on by whatever ad server we're partnering with, or our advertisers are partnering with. So we've seen a lot of our advertisers kind of lead into that context and really prioritize context over anything else, because they've seen that they're getting the greatest results when they're speaking to a viewer based off of what they're watching. So for an example, like home run was hit, players rounding the bases, get an in-picture ad. You can speak to different fans watching that stream in a different manner, sending a congratulatory offering to a viewer if their home team hit that home run, or console the viewer if their, the team they're rooting for got scored on. So a lot of the times we've seen greater results based off of being able to fine tune that messaging, trying to engage the viewer with like better sentiment regarding like how they interact with the brand, and it's more native to what they're watching.
And would you consider that more of a signal or a creative opportunity, right? Because what you're describing seems more like a signal in which you trigger into, maybe it's bottom of the eighth, and you have like Volpe hitting a home run, basically, right? Then you serve an ad for a Yankees fan in the larger Northeast, or maybe New York State. That's a signal coming through, and then a geo ad serve, or are you actually looking at it from a creative standpoint too, where it flips into maybe the Empire State Building in the background of the creative, if it's a pause ad or some sort of combination of a cityscape for New York if it's a video ad?
Yeah, well, it's only a signal that signifies the context, because you can have varying creative types for whatever inventory is being queued. So if you look at a signal as like that's ad inventory, just as you would have a signal that signifies like an ad pod break is coming. So it's like it's ad inventory just like anything else. And because you're able to provide contextual details in that message, advertisers are building a variety of messages for different types of moments. And that's what makes it really impactful, because then you could just dynamically and autonomously deliver a message that speaks to the viewer based off of, all these different cues of what's happening on screen.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And how do you see that playing into areas outside of sports, right? Because I mean, sports is, I would say it's binary, even though in some sense it kind of is, because like it's just two teams playing. But what about like maybe breaking news or even just like live commentary on the stock market through like CNN, for example? Like, do you see that playing into other places as well within kind of fast channels, or is it mainly specifically you're offering geared towards sports?
No, it's definitely not just fast channels. I mean, I think this format, I think if you look at this, it's not just live streaming sports.
Yeah.
It applies to just about every type of content, news, fast, whatever. I think if you just look at this as a new opportunity, a new format, it's really just a canvas that can be deployed for better advertising. I guess if you just think about it, like if we relate this, like, I think how meaningful this is related to like our experiences in our jobs. Like go to a conference, right? Bear with me. I think this analogy will come together. You go to a conference and people come up to me at a conference sometimes, whom I don't know, and they're like, "Hey, what do you do? What's your pitch?" And I'm like, well, intuitively, I'm thinking, I don't want to give you my pitch because then you're now in kind of like, you just put me in a position where I'm just like selling to you, to me, that's trying to sell you a product. I don't even know if I want to sell it to you. I don't know who.
I don't even like you.
Yeah. No, I'm not going to give you my pitch. I want to have a conversation like we're having right now. And I want to weave my messaging within my conversation based off of what you tell me you care about, what your problems are. And then I could provide solutions or I can't. I think advertising should work more like that. And I think that gets lost in the ad pod because once a viewer goes into an ad pod break, we've been trained for the last 80 years to say, some of us who are 80, hey, now I'm being sold to and I'm going to zone out. But if I'm seeing something in the content and it's queuing off my passion points, it knows who I am, it knows what I'm watching, and it speaks to me like a real person, then you're going to get a better action out of me. I think this applies to just about every type of streaming content you can imagine. I think in fast, there's certainly natural breaks. I mean, you have, the baselines of just like credits. That's just like dead space that, someone just watched a movie, what movie they just watched. You could speak to them about the movie and maybe about the ending of the movie and then weave your product into that. And then there's also kind of like dynamically, you could inject graphics and personalized messaging while someone's watching a movie or news or a show, based off of any of the context that is able to be like kind of transcribed from what they're watching. And there's a lot of technologies that are able to work with us and us actually to recognize that ourselves. We're working on a lot of, different AI algorithms to recognize a lot of contextualized moments in stream. And in the fast space, we specifically have a great partnership with World where we're collaborating on that specifically for fast entertainment, and we're powering the monetization experience for about 100, 120 different fast channels right now across LG and Vizio.
That's awesome. Whether it be like fandom or affinity, it could be an affinity towards Scott Van Pelt or fandom towards Messi, or maybe just a general reporter, right? Have you seen success metrics increase because of that contextualized moment being served with that person or entity as the mainstay? And if so, what are you guys using to measure that?
I think that in the first part of that question, first, before you can measure something, and there's obviously plenty of, there's varying challenges with measurement in CTV specifically, but you first need to create attention. And then obviously then you have to figure out how to prove that. So the attentive canvas we have. Then from the reporting side or measurement, the advertisers they want to prove that this is attentive. So they want awareness. So the way we built or designed our platform, it's completely compatible with just about any other third-party measurement, any industry standard ad server. So anything you're layering on naturally in terms of how you're measuring ads, that's going to follow through. So whether that's a study like we've done with, we've done extensive more attitudinal studies with IPG, where we kind of analyzed viewers and viewers' behavior, watching a variety of streaming content over a course of 6 months, and kind of looked at what they remembered from that stream from an in-content ad experience versus an ad pod experience. And we saw that, about 10 times, we saw like a 10 times greater improvement in message recall when they saw this in-content ad experience. And then they measured things like action and just like basically the baseline of action, like you're scanning a QR code. When that's basically applied to like the right timing, context, and creative, and that messaging is aligned, then they were 20% more likely to actually scan and actually purchase something. Because this was like real world examples. The viewers didn't necessarily know what they were being analyzed for, so they would take action on that. So that's just like the basic, like what we can see today and how we actually measure that against what's working in terms of like a programming mix perspective and context. But then it's like, all right, how can we do more? I mean, I think connected TV environments even have a challenge with how they measure who's watching, because we're looking at each TV as one person where there could be 20 people sitting around in the living room. We don't know that. But then the third thing is, we've done studies with like Foursquare. We're measuring exposure to offline viewership, where we've seen a 5 times return on ad spend back to the retail environments, which has been really exciting to see. And we've been looking to do more in how we can measure outcomes based off of, how the exposure of an ad on a connected TV or in program or live sports is synchronized with web search activity, because that's where obviously really commerce is driven.
Yeah. And I'm curious, are you guys, with the obvious like QR code boom, are you guys leveraging secondary screens at all in your measurement as one option to try to capitalize on the amount of people in a room versus like the traditional like top box Nielsen ratings that we all used to do?
Yeah, we want to, the second screen measurement opportunity I think is one of the greatest opportunities that I still consider that untapped in terms of how we're approaching that, because I think it works in two ways. I mean, we could prompt someone to go to their phone and take action, from a from a call to action perspective, which they're doing anyway with the QR. But I think like from an interactivity perspective on the actual ad unit, a lot of the OEMs are maybe coming out with remote control activated and click to shop and things like that. But really, everyone's got their phone in their hand, not necessarily wanting to interact with their remote control. So how do we do a better job of actually tying interactivity to the phone? I think is a huge opportunity. And from a measurement opportunity, we're exploring that. But I think we still need more scale in how we can correlate those attributions just from like a who's watching perspective, because privacy issues gets in the way as well. Unless would love to hear your thoughts on that, but that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all kids at heart, so any way you can gamify my experience will help us get more involved.
That's true. But I think to your point, even like attribution with privacy, there's too many roadblocks, in my opinion, when it comes to even like herding with iOS devices, whether it be Apple TV and iPhones, which is 52% of all folks in the US. Granted, it's a global issue as well. The attribution of cross screen is almost too difficult. Even if it's like a herded IP in a household, if you're in New York City, that almost goes out the window, because you could be overlapped with your neighbor and or someone above you or below you. So there's a lot of challenges, I think, to be solved for there. But I think whoever cracks it first will definitely have a leg up, to say the least, in the ecosystem.
Yeah, I think the OEMs are in the best position to do their own ecosystem attribution, and then we have more fragmentation, more wall gardening, I guess, but I think, I don't think there's another way around that to make that uniform, unless a couple companies get selected as like, you get to work across everything and everyone's going to trust these like two company. That's the challenge.
And you kind of touched upon this before, but there's obviously still some operational channels when it comes to FAST, and especially relating to like the infrastructure and how you're working with all the DSPs and SSPs. What are some of the main kind of blockers you're seeing yourself across FAST, and especially related to live sports?
Yeah, so I think what we also have, I think when you talk about challenges, it's helpful to put in perspective of like the history of like where we are right now and how much time has passed since we actually activated the first of what we're doing today. So, I mean, if you just look at like the first ad being inserted into a stream on TV was like over 80 years ago. And then you weren't even really able to watch video online until about 2005, where people started to adopt high-speed internet. And in 2005, people still didn't have, a lot of people still didn't have high-speed internet. So I look back into that first live stream experience where we activated March Madness on demand. There was no video SSP. There was no video ad server. There was no DSP. There was really no technical infrastructure to operate. There was hardly a streaming infrastructure that can operate that stream. It was all based like leveraging lots of rudimentary methods. But we were expected to operate a massive production live stream to viewers that were all at work and actually on high speed internet and ready to watch March Madness. So we had to figure out how we get ads in there. At that time, I was a sales rep, and I had sold, I think it was Staples, BW, and Subway, and they were my clients running in this. It was St. Patty's Day, and everyone was really nervous because this was the first. We never kind of like. There's no way to practice this at this scale, so we launched it, and credit to Jared Willichinski, who is actually the head of revenue and operations at Paramount today. He was literally the industry. I think he's the industry's first ad stitcher as himself. He would literally take 15 or 30-second ads and then put them in the stream at the right time, watching all of the games that are happening, in a crazy cadence. So just looking where we were then. Oh, and by the way, back then I think we executed some really amazing ad experiences too, given what we had. There was I don't know if you guys ever came across this, but for Staples, we did the boss button. So everyone's watching March Madness basically at work. So as they're watching, someone, their boss comes by and you basically click the Staples boss button and a spreadsheet comes up over their screen. So it makes it look like they're on a spreadsheet and not watching March Madness at work.
It's too good.
Yeah, which was crazy how innovative that was and how I think that's still one of the best ad executions that had ever been put forth in digital. But anyway, that's just a long-winded way of saying like we basically had from 2005 to now, was that 20 years to basically invent this industry. So now we're at a point where we have major technologies that work really well, SSPs, DSPs, ad servers. We have an infrastructure that works really well, but now we have a lot of players, a lot going on, a lot of technologies that were built for VOD video and still operating that way today. So then get into a live streaming let's talk about fast and live streaming sports kind of in two separate components. They both share some problems, but you go the way it works is you get a signal in the stream that says, hey, we're going into let's just take an ad pod break, for example. Then the SSAI provider sends a signal to the ad server. The ad server sends a signal to all their demand sources. Supply side platforms, could be a few. Then the supply side platform send that signal to the DSP. DSP decides what they want to buy, goes into those, and then the ad server decides what they're going to take from those SSPs, and then the SSAI provider has to stitch it. And that all has to be done in like crazy milliseconds, right? And then every single provider has their own opinion about how much time they get to do these things. And it's all different. So it's a gigantic puzzle that then falls on the SSAI provider to also have to stop, because I guess as they say, shit rolls downhill. So you're dealing with all this latency from everybody. You got to speed it up, and you got to make sure you know how long to stay open and available to process all the information and put it in the stream, all before a viewer gets to that point of the stream, or even do that on a rolling basis. And then each platform the stream's distributed to, that happens all over again. Like that's all happening simultaneously, and all the times are different across, like if you're streaming on Samsung, maybe in fast, LG, Vizio, they all have their different ad architectures. Mm-hmm. So what we're doing to solve that is we analyze that time gaps, and we make our system smart enough to then dynamically change based off of whatever environment or ad tech infrastructure after it reads what signaling that it's getting back. And that has helped a lot and improved a lot of those gaps. We've also gone as high up in the chain as possible to collaborate on that time gap and those delays with the SSPs and DSPs. So for certain clients, we have this fluid chain where everyone knows exactly what's going to happen every time. Now, things don't always work exactly as planned, especially then when you take that to live sports. I think fast is a little more predictable, but in live sports, things change rapidly. And then you can imagine when we're doing all that for these non-standard incremental ad opportunities, then that even gets more complex because now the viewer is actually watching content and we have to dynamically replace and change content for each individual viewer based off of whatever ad we want to serve those individual viewers and integrate that into the content.
I couldn't agree more. And I think one of the things you mentioned is having this supply chain kind of communicate. And while I do think this comment is probably too early to be had, is I think so MCPs or model contextual protocols within large language models will play a factor into how to structure outside vendors. For example, if it's a bidder to an ad server to an SSP, DSP, et cetera, if everyone's using some version of their own AI to optimize their process, the MCP will unify that protocol. So I do think there's an opportunity for ad tech to move forward in the right direction in concert. But I think that's probably 5 years out, given the fact that like MCPs have, it came out in 2024 from Amazon's protocol and they're using with Claude. But it's already caught on pretty fast within the last, I would say, 18 months. But that aside, because not everyone is using AI or using LLMs, what do you think can fill that gap between what's happening today between the supply chain and the end result? Or is it just pretty much fragmented until we figure out a better way of automation?
No, I think standardization and how we classify inventory, that's unified and agreed upon, and standardization in the protocols that need to be deployed and rules, just applying basic rules and structure for that everyone can abide by, just like we've done with over time with just about everything. Advertising specs, VAST 2.0, 3.0, everyone kind of follows a series of rules. We have to create better rules for the challenges we're facing in live streaming. That's not going to solve everything, but like technology will fill in the gaps if we all get on a uniform standard, and that will help. But that's also not the only problem right now. There's one more that I would like to point out.
One.
Oh, yeah. Be careful of that because there's more than one.
I think the other major challenge, and this specifically affects FAST platforms, it affects a lot. Like everything, I would say non-live sports, because live sports is the most, I guess, coveted type of inventory. You're not only relying on SSPs and OpenRTB to fulfill that, those ads there, right? But in FAST, I think from the business side, there's a challenge because they're just kind of like duplication of demand sources that are contributing to low ad fulfillment rates. And CPMs are getting really compressed because you're just duplicating your demand sources because just paying the same SSPs for either their ORT, for most likely their OpenRTP demand, that's just decisioning on data attributes, right? So you have a major gap in how you can fulfill your ad pods. And I think the solutions there is just better ad experiences that can be created as an opportunity, because creating a better ad experience doesn't just only affect an outcome for an advertiser or maybe better experience for a viewer or incremental revenue. It also impacts how you can create new and diversified demand sources, because you're attracting new types of advertising budgets, new ways of thinking about how advertisers are approaching their media spend, because they're attracted to, these, how they're going to create, new ad creative for new ad opportunities.
Yep, for sure. And I do have to respectfully disagree with one of your earlier comments, which is 2005 was not 20 years ago. 20 years ago was the 1980s. And I refuse to acknowledge any of us are over 25 years old.
I was wondering where you're going with that, to be honest.
Yeah, I know. Amazing. Well, I think this has been a very insightful conversation. I thank you again for your time. And I think I would like to kind of close us out with a question we haven't done in a few episodes. Okay. And you kind of teased this already, but what is on your bookshelf? What are you reading? You mentioned it might be not as traditional as others.
Well, I think in general, I usually read nonfiction. Right now, this is the safest one I'll say. But I think really interesting. I mean, it's called the Stargate Chronicles. So it's like, it talks about, it goes into details about the memoirs from a guy that essentially like was on a team of like psychic spies that they deployed during the Cold War. So they basically created this team of like remote viewers that could spy on Russia from the confines of the United States. And they were actually able to really get some detailed intel about what's happening in places that were many, many miles away, all from, a room. And I just think that's really interesting because I think the only way that we're ever going to really see beyond like the Milky Way is now with our own minds.
Love it. Cool. Well, if anyone wants to read it, we'll drop the link in the bio.
Yeah.
But Scott, thank you again for the time, man. It's been illuminating and very insightful. So looking forward to hopefully having you on next. And welcome back from your 4-week stint. Because for those who don't know, he was traveling for about 4 weeks. And it's good to have him back, at the home base.
Yeah, using the brain again.
Exactly.
Thanks a lot.
Cheers,
Cool,
Scott.
thank you.
Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoyed this episode of the Pubway podcast. This episode is brought to you by SeedTag, the global leader in neurocontextual advertising. Learn more and reach out to us at seedtag.com.